What I will be clear on is I'm not best placed to answer any in-depth questions on a number of these areas, they being 6 being one of them, sorry, because I'm not police officer. But I can provide you with an update. So with regards to serious violence, there is a serious violence duty and a serious violence strategy, lots of measures and output that's been generated. That first slide is really just to show you the various streams of work that the police are leading on around violence in the nighttime economy, sexual and domestic violence. Other than the commission, the research into the licensing landscape, the rest are all either completed or ongoing actions. The page 19 slide around the current overview, you can take it as read, the data showing a rolling change of 14.5% increase on serious violence. And our most challenging periods, as always, as anywhere else in the country, are the next couple of months. When we're talking about some of the work that we're doing to mitigate that. Thursday through Sundays are peak times for serious violence, in line with the number of people that are staying out in the nighttime economy. Moving on to page 20, you see a little bit more detail around serious violence, and I'm sure there's a number of things that jump out immediately. You can see that the nighttime economy remains the largest theme when it comes to serious violence and remains our priority area. You can also see that sexual violence is also a key priority area. We're seeing volumes of sexual violence, and again, the coming months are the pinch point time of the year for sexual violence, especially around the nighttime economy, sexual assaults and rapes, and the like. Lots of good work being done by the police in this area. Lots of good data there to work. Really high quality analytics, and not just saying that next to Richard genuinely. I've been doing this work for the best part of 20 years. I would say that the City of London Police's grip on their data is amongst the best I've ever seen in the country. I mean, that's just it.
Did you want to pause there to take questions on serious violence? Any?
With the caveat of
in the evening, often quite late. So I think we do need to be making sure that there are arrangements in place to make sure that is going to be as safe as possible too. So would anybody like to comment on Helen's suggestion of bringing nighttime economy back to this committee for scrutiny?
Could you help me understand what do you mean by that? Because the nighttime economy has specific elements to it, some of which are subject to particular grant committees. So what bit Or do you mean the whole of the nighttime economy? Because that's definitely beyond our terms.
I mean, as I understand it, the terms of reference for this committee is to scrutinise the City of London's activity in crime and disorder. And what we're seeing here is that there's this significant area of crime in the nighttime economy. And I know from being a member of PAB that there's a lot of focus and effort put on that. And I know that the local police committee will look at performance and REC will look at the investment that's been made in that area. But I've understood that the role of this committee is to scrutinise the activities in crime and disorder. It's not to performance manage, but to scrutinise and therefore challenge the application of the resources and to challenge the effectiveness of that. It's not to take over from any of the subcommittees in police authority or PAB itself, but it adds an extra layer of scrutiny as opposed to performance that I think falls to this committee to undertake. And Richard might have another comment on.
Exactly that, Helen. It's about scrutinising the work of underlying the partnership. So it's not just, it's the police are being one aspect of that, it's the whole partnership approach. So to the chair's point, and given the prominence of it, I think there is something about coming back to this committee with how is the partnership as a whole, all of the constituent parts, what are they bringing together as a true partnership in reducing crime and disorder in relation to the nighttime economy. It's not, as James says, about the functioning of the nighttime economy. That is not the job of this committee, as I see.
The committee has, well, the strategy has identified four priorities. So I think it would be appropriate for this committee to do like a deep dive on each of the four priorities. And that this could, the serious violence, nighttime economy could be the first of those deep dives. John.
Yeah, and from a licensing committee point of view, this is something we take very seriously, and we get weekly reports of all the different crimes and activities in the pubs, which is very useful to us. I like the idea that this committee should scrutinise the entire input into the nighttime economy and how we deal with it. We certainly bust a gut, so to speak, but perhaps we can learn lessons from other organisations within this partnership and make it better. So I think it's a very good idea.
Peter?
Yeah, I mean, certainly, it's always my view. I mean, I used to be a sort of a member of the Safer City Partnership when it had members on it. I always found that where it was useful was looking at where there was issues that cut across service committees. And to use a good example, a lot of licensing as well, is if you have some drunken people pile out of a pub, make a lot of noise, get into a fight, somebody gets injured, somebody else goes and relieves themselves down the alley. Then in one incident, you have a licensing issue in relation to what happens inside the premises. You have a noise pollution issue, with the noise team alerted. You have a police issue in relation to the violence. You have potentially the NHS getting involved, the ambulance service getting involved if somebody's injured. Let's say somebody then throws a cigarette into the bin, and that you've got the fire brigade coming along, and then you've got the street cleansing service coming up and tidying it up all away. So that's a good example of where I think, from our point of view, scrutinising how joined up the corporation and its partners' responses are to issues that cut across those service areas is a critical part of what we do. And I don't know whether it's the right time. It probably is the right time to throw this question in. And apologies if it's somewhere else on the agenda. Is that one of the things which I know we've done in the past is to get a multi-agency approach in terms of providing a service in the month before Christmas for dealing with people who are distressed, lost, drunk, been taking drugs, victim of crime, as we have those sort of busy nights running up to Christmas.
Thank you. And I think we can, if the next meeting's in May, then we can be learning from the experience over the Christmas period. Bill, Richard, Simon, any comments?
Just to reiterate, I think in the Safe City Partnership, we hear of all of those inputs from our licensing colleagues, from our Commission Community Patrolling to the work, even the taxi marshalling that happens. So I think having a deep dive is the opportunity for you to be cited on that and that partnership and judge its success.
Thank you. Move on to the next priority of violence against women and girls.
Thank you, Chair. So we are, and put it in formal language, we're going gangbusters at the moment in our work on violence against women and girls. I'm really confident in saying that. We've got 2 extremely competent specialists on domestic abuse and violence against women and girls in the Community Safety Service now. One of them, a lady called Claire, wrote a nationally regarded paper on the MARAC processes for domestic abuse nationally, and we're adopting the best practice from her paper into our work. We've got some really good brains behind this. We have a tactical group now, a quarterly delivery group. We have fortnightly task and finish meetings around violence against women and girls. We are coming into a period currently of, we know, is the spike. Christmas party season is not great for violence against women and girls in the nighttime economy. We know that. We are, so as I said, we've got a fortnightly task and finish group that have all of our partners around the table to mitigate the harm that's being caused, because we're at the start of the slope upwards into the Christmas run up now. Now we're in November. We have a lens on domestic abuse and violence against women and girls, which is called the 16 Days of Activism Against Gender-Based Violence. This is a United Nations run international program. It runs from late November until mid-December, and we have a lot of ground level pieces of work that are taking place in that 16-day period. We've got walk and talks, we've got lived experience conversations. We're walking around the city with people who use it in the nighttime economy to help understand from their perspective where it feels safe and where it doesn't, what do we need to focus our energy on. We are designing a toolkit for hotels, which is being delivered in the next few weeks to help front office staff spot people who may be at heightened risk from harm or violence as they're coming through the lobbies of hotels, and that toolkit's being disseminated to all of the hotels in the city, along with a joint letter from the corporation and the police around that. They do good work already, the hotels, and we're just refreshing their learning around that. That will lead into what is called Operation Tinsel, which is the City of London Police's Christmas work around the nighttime economy. And so the fortnightly meetings that have been going on for about 3 months now to get ahead of this nighttime economy issue will continue all the way through Op Tinsel, which runs through until the new year. So we've got a really good grip on what we are trying to do to turn the mountains into molehills with this, which is preventative is the best tools that we can use of trying to prevent these from happening in the first place. We have a commissioned, I'm not sure if it was mentioned previously, we have 2 commissioned domestic abuse services. One which is the Domestic Abuse Intervention Service from Hackney, and the other is an organisation called ICRO, which works specifically, no, it will work with anybody, but has a focus on people from Middle Eastern or North African backgrounds, because we spotted that there was a gap there. So we commissioned that service for a year, and we've just rolled that out for another 2 years. Police statistics around VORG show that we're either at sort of median or upper quartile of what we would expect to see in the city. So there's the work that we're doing. I'm hoping that we'll see a real tangible reduction in where we are versus where we may have been without the work. Coming back on this point in May, I'd actually really quite like to, because we're doing a lot of new things this Christmas that we haven't focused on historically, and I for one would be really interested to present to you for scrutiny whether that's actually had an impact. I hope it will, and I think that it will. Numbers fluctuate around violence against women and girls, but you can see on page 24 there are a couple of hotspot areas, in Bishopsgate being one, Middlesex Street, Liverpool Street. The timings are as you would expect. Thursday evenings, Friday evenings into the Saturday early hours. Again, the police have got very high levels of data on violence against women and girls. You know, we know to a street level where these are occurring and where to focus energy, and they're doing I think they're doing a pretty good job of focusing on the problem locations through their new targeted patrolling models and their problem oriented policing models. I'll stop waffling about violence against women and girls. If you've got any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
James and Steve.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to sort of collect some things together across pages 22, 23 and 24. My first observation, which applies to the paper more broadly, there are quite a lot of acronyms. And this is a public paper that should be available and understood by everybody. So could we put a bit of effort into explaining what DA and UQ and so on are, so that people can easily read it without knowing in advance? So the first point that I wanted to raise is why, and I hope I'm not missing it, I think I'm right, there's no mention about Operation Reframe in here, which is a significant part of what we do. John and I were out with the most recent event in September. It's been a big part of our overall program, so I was surprised it didn't seem to get picked up. And I think it's important on that, linking to my next couple of observations, because I hope all members will be aware, but I wouldn't blame you for not immediately. Now, I think we should actually have front and centre at the beginning of every pack who our partners are, because we're talking about the partnership. Now, they are set out on page 38 if you go digging about, but a key partner is the City of London Police. And my final observation is about them. So one, Operation Reframe, which the police are very much involved in, why not here? But two, as you see from the stats on here, as you see from the notes on page 23, as you see from the map on page 24, we all know and have known for some time that the Bishopgate area is a hotspot. There are others, but it is a major hotspot. And it's a major hotspot when it's currently got our most visible police station right there. And our most visible police station is being taken away. And one of the things that I get very concerned about on the other committees upon which I sit, deal with the police project, is that we spend a lot of time talking about the commerciality of the Salisbury Square development and so on. But we do not in those places pick up what is the consequence for visible policing and tackling some of these issues when that station is gone. And several committees have asked that question repeatedly, including to the chairman of the Police Authority Board. And we have never had a direct answer. And given this is a partnership and we're in partnership with the police and we're looking at things like this, maybe this is a great place where we could get some explanations of when they move, how do we tackle this? Thank you, Chair.
Firstly, thanks for the steer around the acronyms and the setting out. As I said, not wedded to this version. Anything I can do to make it clear for people, I appreciate the input. So thanks for that. With regards to the, with the greatest respect, I'm not going to touch the police station closing question. I think that's a bit outside of my purview with Mr. Riley on my left. What isn't in here, and thanks again for the steer around the work on Reframe. Your point's well made. In that local area, just so it's something that's not in this pack, is the, again, this is a police-led initiative, so I don't want to sort of be looking like I'm trying to take credit for it, because it's very much led by them and their good work. There's now you may have seen it, the nighttime bus. They've converted a big long wheelbase Mercedes, and that's being parked front and centre outside this hotspot area at Bishopsgate for that visible policing reason. That will be available for any individuals to come up to if they have got issues. Everything from they've lost their shoes to their phones out of charge, so they need help getting home. They'll be supported through that process as being parked front and centre, like I say, just around the corner from that McDonald's at the train station. And that's a new initiative, and that goes, I think, from Thursday through Saturday early evening till about 6 a.m. So that's really encouraging, but that's not in here. But with regards to your points around sort of the additions in the paper,
I'll absolutely take that on board, so I appreciate it.
Can I get an answer to my question?
What, around the police station closures?
No, that's the second question. My first question, the one I thought you were answering, was why Operation Reframe isn't discussed. Now, you chose to tell us about the bus. Now, just so happens that for your information, because I know you're new, it's the current chair, the deputy chair of the licensing committee who put it in place. And actually, under my tenure and a previous licensing chair over here, Operation Reframe is a multi-year thing that we've been working on with the police, and I think it's been great. And because we've been so engaged in it, and because that has been, as far as I'm aware, sitting on police board subs and sitting on licensing, that's been such a big part of how we're dealing with this. I was just wondering why it's not here.
So I don't have a ready answer to that. Like I say, your point's made. I'm not going to bluster and flim flam an answer for you, but I will absolutely make sure it's included moving forward. That's all I can say.
Should we sort of have an action to bring it back to the next one to report on? Is that going to be too late for you, James?
Big part.
Right, okay, so
Yeah,
we'll include it.
Absolutely, just an omission on our part. But if we're going to look at the nighttime economy in the next meeting, we'll very much make sure that it's featured within that note.
Thank you. So question 2.
Questions on the Bishopsgate Police Station. I know members made this before. Come back to the point around what the purpose of this committee is, though, Chair, which is about the scrutiny of the work of the partnership, not individual elements of it. I know James is concerned about this. The place where that should get addressed and get answered is in Resources and Estates Committee and the Police Authority Board. Resources and Estates Committee terms of reference specifically talks about the estate programme for the city. My understanding is that the police are still considering what the appropriate, in their view, physical presence is in the east of the city when the full move to Salisbury Square takes place. There is some interesting points around deployment times. Nowhere is immeasurably far in the city, as we know. There is some interesting stats about the usage of the front counter in Bishopsgate. So how often is it actually used by members of the public? I think the usage is low, but the deployment time is a good one. Sorry, that is a long-winded way of saying they are still considering the eastern, the area in the east and what their physical presence should be. I think the scrutiny of the police consideration of the estate takes place without being desperately bureaucratic about it in a different committee, and that committee is REC. This is the work of the partnership.
Just ask Helen if she wanted to comment.
Well, the only comment I can make at the moment is that Richard's absolutely right. It's still under consideration, but I think there is a clear awareness of where the majority of incidents of crime takes place. But that is different to the response and the physical location of police officers. But it is still under consideration. When decisions are made and there's an implementation plan, then I guess if it's relevant to the partnership and relevant to the scrutiny here, then it can come back here. But James, I think you wanted to add more.
Well, I wanted to clarify my question because I think it's been misunderstood. And therefore I think the officer's answer is wrong, but it may be my fault. So I'll try again. I'm not asking or suggesting that this committee has a say on where a police station physically is or is not. But look at page 38 and onwards. Look at how the partnership strategy is described. Look at what the Deputy Chair Helen added earlier about the importance of scrutinising the outcomes and so on. The visibility of our presence is a thread through all of these things. That's what I'm asking about. And what I'm saying is that the licensing committee have asked the Police Authority Board and got no answer repeatedly. Maybe this is the place where we can ask the question, and the question may be answered on the basis that they're still thinking about it, they're still thinking through. But I do think that somewhere we need to be able to say, look, the visibility aspect is something we do need to understand, and I think that may be something that we can ask about.
Let me try and respond differently. There is a rep committee next week. I suggest that your question goes to the committee next week. Richard will be there. I will be there chairing it. and that we look at it again. The only further point I'd make, though, is that visibility is not just about a physical building. It's about the police on the streets. It's about the community police teams. So visibility is not just one there isn't just one aspect to that question, I think. But we'll take it to REC as a question that's come from this committee to REC, and I'll try our very best to clarify something for you. But it will be in the absence of any firm premises decisions being made about the eastern part of the city. It would be in advance of that. It would be broad brush principles. That would be it at this stage.
John?
Thank you, Chair. We've talked a lot about the nighttime economy, and how that affects violence, but as you pointed out, there's one other main aspect, and that's domestic violence. And we all know that domestic violence also increases over the Christmas period with all the stresses of people living at home. I just wanted some assurance that all of our agencies are working together in a joined up fashion, and not only to deal with the aftermath of violence, but to have a prevent policy to advise people of the situation and the dangers prior to the Christmas period. Could you give me that assurance?
Thank you. Yes, I completely agree with everything that you've just said. So yes, I can provide the assurance. We're just in the process of launching, relaunching an ongoing campaign which is called Don't Cross the Line, which is focused on the Christmas period to try and mitigate the harm and really reiterate the facts publicly through licensed premises and through hotels with the police that these kind of offences are a crime, and we have a zero tolerance policy in the City of London towards them. Alongside that, this 16 days work that I alluded to earlier on, we also have in the background from a structured perspective a really high functioning. We have quite low volumes of domestic abuse cases to manage as a corporation because the right space for those cases to be investigated and managed is in the borough or county where the individual lives. So an incident, we work really closely with our peer boroughs around all over the city. We've got really close relationships around domestic abuse. The cases that occur within the city to people who live here, we have a very robust set of measures to support them. And we've got the programme, like I say, the Don't Cross the Line campaign and the work through our potential to really promote that we don't tolerate that in the square mile. So I don't know if that provides any reassurance. Our case numbers for domestic abuse in the square mile are low. We'll have a couple of referrals a month, if that. Sometimes we'll go months without a referral for a case.
John?
No, I agree with that, but I haven't heard that you've got any action warning people, for instance, mentioning to women's groups that exist within the city, etc., that be aware, giving them some sort of reassurance that you are there afterwards, where if things are kicking off, they can go for help when things are shut down over Christmas. So are we doing any work on that at all? Pre-warning.
Sorry, I understand the question. Apologies. Yeah. So yes, we are. We're working with all of the women's groups. We have as I mentioned before, we've got a lady called Claire, who's our domestic abuse specialist. We also have a woman called Jenna, who's very experienced in the violence against women in Goals Field, who is leading our active coordination with all of these groups across the square mile, but also across the Pan London. So we're very well embedded with them all, and there's lots of training that takes place over the Christmas period.
Right. Oh, Steve?
Chair. Well, I was going to ask a banal question. I'll probably still will, but just to reflect on James, the stuff that James has asked. I think we do need perhaps to be clear about what the role of this committee is, and I like the fact that what Helen has now said is that there's an issue raised here. It's not for here to make decisions, but that will then be referred back to the appropriate committee for discussion, who may agree with us, may not agree with us. And so I think maybe we need to be clear about that. And that's really why I raised that issue about minute 7, because we spent time talking about that in the last meeting, but there is no indication whatsoever that any of the things we said then have been reflected anywhere else, or we haven't had any feedback from us saying other committees don't think this is a priority or whatever. So I think if we could have that mechanism sort of established, I think that would make the work of this committee much more to the point. Now we'll ask my banal question. Page 24. I was really interested that the hotspots, particularly the Old Bailey between 1 and 3. I wondered what that was about. Is that the judges going out after their lunch, or new change at 5 o'clock on a Sunday? So I just found this sort of hotspot map a bit. I wasn't quite sure what message we were trying to give there, and maybe given that this is a public document, maybe it's not as helpful as it otherwise could be. That's a question, by the way.
Could I ask Richard to maybe pick up question 1 about the sort of role of the role of
Really limiting answer potentially on that one. It's just about those sort of Steve's process point. Yeah, I wonder whether we can either do this as a committee chair or definitely bring it back. But when this committee was re-established in June 2023, we did put some papers which had a fairly bold terms of reference, but some ways of working and some assumptions in it. I wonder whether we recirculate that out of committee to help members and then have a further discussion about it when you come back, because you may look at them, Steve, and think, hang on, I don't think this in practice works in the light of experience. But we did do that 2 years ago, but we can recirculate and discuss.
I think that would be helpful. So for question number 2.
Okay,
Leave the Fifth Amendment on the churches. I genuinely don't know. Steve, again, unless others feel differently, I think it is a good point. There was probably a point in time where this meant a lot to some people, but in translation it means rather less to the point. So
no, just to agree that this is I'm not going to plead the fact that it's my first one, but I'm taking away all of these pointers to make sure that the stuff that we're bringing to this committee is useful for you. So just thanks. Please do keep ripping it apart because I find it genuinely helpful.
So should we move to priority 3, acquisitive crime? Thank you, Phil.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a brief one on this acquisitive crime. The information that was shared with me by the police for this. Again, being a police-led function, I don't want to speak too much to the work that the police are doing around that, but I'd be very happy to take away questions and return them out of committee if that would be helpful for you from an operational perspective. Really, just to say that we expect seasonal changes and an increase during the winter months, as you would normally see in any city in the country. See a spike of acquisitive crime during Christmas. What I do know is that the police are using the considerable analytical resources now available to them to start making predictive models around their patrolling, and they're doing some really interesting work around data. And again, that's maybe something that we could share separately to this, because that's a bit of a potentially a deep dive in the next one as well, in the next of these, because the police's grip on their data and the predictive work that they can do is really quite strong now. This is the one I'm probably going to speak about least, because being police-led, I don't want to speak for them. But as I say, I'm really happy to take away any questions and bring them back to you.
Before I come to Peter, you've got a question, Peter and James. Richard, do you have any sort of comments on whether it's appropriate to come back to this committee with some of the experiences around the new analysts team?
Well, again, Chair, I think as Phil said, there'll be a lot of focus on this at local policing committee on Monday, and that's where the detailed scrutiny of the policing aspect, where I think if I may say, I think the committee should come back to is what is the contribution of other partners to reducing acquisitive crime in the city, whether that's snatch theft of mobile phones or retail theft in shops. For example, there is a I think there's a role for the corporation, and we've been discussing that amongst officers, including about communications campaigns or things like signage. So there's a few issues from the wider partnership perspective. I think this committee should come back to, not just on what the police are doing to reduce phone theft.
Peter, then James.
Thanks. I appreciate you may not have the answer to this question, but it's worth putting on the record because it's such a hot topic of discussion everywhere in the city at the moment. I mean, the graph tends to show little change over a 2.5-year period. Anecdotally, I hear all the time that there's been a spike in mobile phone theft, particularly from bikes or electric bikes jumping onto pavements or snapping. This tends to suggest that maybe, as is often the case, the anecdotes are not actually correct, and that it's just people are talking about it more, and that it was always there. Am I wrong?
Yeah, I think it's kind of a national question, the perceptions of crime. An individual's perception of crime will have very little bearing on the amount of crime that's actually happening in the locality. Certain cases become, certain types of criminal activity or antisocial behaviours become, they get put under the microscope, and as such, it feels like every 25 minutes someone's getting their iPhone snatched off their hands, on a street. And whilst we are seeing that as a growth, I don't think it is, as you say, it's not, an exponentially growing curve. No, you got it. But we are trying to tell people as often as we can, just don't stand at the edge of the pavement at night with your nice big bright £1,000 device held in 2 fingers right by the road. So we're putting, and I'm being trite, but we are actually putting that message out to people quite consistently.
Chair, if I may, so the stats which will go to local policing committee on Monday will show that overall there is a reducing trend on mobile phone theft. Whether people feel safe is a separate issue, and including stuff you see on social media about London being the epicenter of mobile phone theft, people not making a distinction between what happens in the Metropolitan Police District and what happens in the city, and there is a difference between the two areas. So there's a bit of a communications effort, both in terms of a prevention advice, but setting out what the reality is. But the trend is downwards, although not absolutely dramatically, as you may say.
James.
Thank you. I have a question. I suspect you want to send somewhere else. My question is fairly straightforward. What are we going to do about this? Because the information is great, but actually what we don't know is what can we do? What are we trying to do to get improvements? I suspect that is something that others must consider elsewhere, perhaps at Police Authority Board or whatever. But I think that's the bit that's missing from the presentation. It's good for us to understand, but if we're here to scrutinise how the partnerships are going to make things better, we also have to have some idea of, with this, what are we trying next? Thank you.
And Richard.
Again, your point's made about the contents of this to allow you to apply the correct levels of scrutiny. What we're straight off the top of my head, the things that's useful for you to know is we are designing a 2026 plan for focus on what we know over the course of that 12-month period is spikes and trends. For example, I know we're talking about acquisitive crime at the moment, but we know that during the World Cup season, for example, we know domestic abuse spikes during the World Cup, goes up 60% if England lose a match, and it goes up 40% if England win a match. So we know this to be true. So we are planning out our next calendar year, and again, I'd be very happy to share that with you. We've not had a sort of targeted 12-month plan on what are we doing in January, what are we focusing on in February. So we're designing that as we speak, because that is a gap. So whilst I don't have it for you, I'd be happy to share it once it's been prepared. I think in part it's because we've not had sort of someone in my role in the corporation before having that strategic lens on this forward plan. So I don't have an answer for you straight away, but I will do soon.
Appropriate to this scrutiny committee, because it is one of our 3 strategic priorities. So I do think at some stage next year, we can do a deep dive into acquisitive crime, but probably maybe this time next year, because we only have 2 meetings a year. But thank you, James. I do think it is one that we do need to keep a focus on. You're all nodding, yeah. Richard?
Yeah, I'm definitely nodding. But come back to it's the partnership element. So, and maybe we can bring this up at local policing committee on Monday. So there will be a focus on reducing theft at that committee. The papers which go to that talk about, and I quote, a partnership problem solving approach is being taken to target key crime areas. So reasonable question from this committee would be, well, let's spell that out then to your point, James, about what does a partnership problem solving approach in practice and nuts and bolts actually look like, and then you scrutinise the results of that.
A very good question for us.
It's also
Then you can answer it. Yes. Thank you.
Yes. Well, that's
No, it's only
yeah. No, okay.
Anybody else on acquisitive crime? Anything else? Priority 4, public spaces.
That's very kind. I've never had anyone invite me to do more questions. I will leave you there. I'm afraid I have to get to something else. Thank you.
Priority 4.
Thank you, Chair. So priority 4 in the strategy is safer public spaces. As I mentioned, that's language that we've picked up from the policing plan. It being a partnership model, it makes sense to align the language. What I wanted to focus on for this committee was the work that we've been doing around encampments and the antisocial behaviour that can be linked to entrenched rough sleeping and encampments, with the important caveat and clarification that we do not, will not, and will never consider rough sleeping in and of itself criminal or antisocial. That being said, there are behaviours that may be linked to entrenched rough sleeping, which do cause alarm, harassment or distress, and can be tackled using civil legislations rather than criminal. So we are really focusing on our efforts to mitigate the harm caused by rough sleeping. We have a number of different channels by which we do that. We have monthly multi-agency days of action, we call them, where we essentially go en masse with our key partners. So that would be rough sleeping teams, assertive outreach teams, for example, our policing colleagues, health will come along as well, and we go to every single encamped area, we engage with the individuals there, we street cleanse, make sure that properties are lit well, that they're safe, and tackle any empty tents will get cleared out, and serve notices on both empty tents to make sure that we can take them away legally, but also just talking about encampments just at the moment. And more recently, we've got a new process for executive director level sign off to start enforcement against tents in challenging areas. And the practical example I wanted to share with you is the White Lion subway. That's had a series of tents in there, and it's impacting school children to get to school. They're having to use surface streets to cross the road rather than using the subway tunnel, which is right there. So as part of the sign-off process, we have to make sure that all these individuals are in receipt of or have access to our support offer, but they've now all been served with 28-day notices last week, and so the law says we have to give them 28 days, but after 28 days they will be moving on. That's a officer-led process, but sign off at a very senior level. And essentially, we have to prepare essentially what I'd consider like a civil legal bundle, statements, impact assessments. It's really quite robust. But we're now at a space for the first time in the city where we've got an enforcement pathway, and we've started using that. I think that's useful to know. I thought I'd put some information on page 29 because we are engagement and education led rather than enforcement led. We use StreetLink, which is where an individual can make a note on a mobile phone, use 3 words, and then our outreach teams can get out there, and they're normally on that space, if not the same day, then certainly within 24 hours. And you can see we had 173 referrals. This is in the period from June to August, which is the most recent figures I had available for this committee. And in that period as well, there were 298 points of contact by our outreach teams. There's every different city has a different approach. From the most extreme, such as Liverpool, where they will literally rip tents out of the ground and just toss them away with everybody's belongings, which I have views on, to our approach, which is at the other end of that bell curve, which is very much a support-led. I think our approach is the right one. We're seeing lots of referrals into Snow Hill Court, for example, and individuals being moved into temporary accommodation and supported through that process. If we are removing belongings, we store them. We let people know how to get them. These are human beings, they're not animals. They need to be afforded respect and courtesy as we're kind of managing this process. Our outreach teams are doing wonderful work, and we are I'm looking forward to seeing how this 28-day notice period works and this enforcement pathway works. It's the first time we're doing it in the square mile. I've used similar processes in other cities to great effect, so I'm optimistic about that. So that's the sort of the spotlight on the encampment work that's being done. More widely, what we are trying to do is really standardise our levels of knowledge and understanding to tackle antisocial behaviour and community safety issues across not just ourselves but our partners. So to that end, we've commissioned quite a lot of training. Yesterday was the last day of the Level 2 diploma in ASB case management principles. We had 18 staff and partners. So that's health, licensing, housing, police officers, community safety staff who were in the committee room at the end just yesterday, wrapping up that course. That's the equivalent of a GCSE, essentially, in ASB. In a reciprocal arrangement, all of our community safety staff are being put through the police's problem orientated policing course. We're about halfway through that course at the moment, so make sure we're thinking about responses to antisocial behaviour and community safety in the same way as our partners, and we're all using the same language and the same processes and the same models. And finally, when on a training space, we have a number of different multi-agency risk assessment conferences. They're a statutory meeting, and as such, you have to be trained in order to run those, be a chair or deputy chair. And in some cases, it's useful to have training just to be sat in that meeting to make sure you're adding value to it. So all of our staff, we've now got redundancies for chairs and co-chairs for those meetings, and we are in the process of commissioning some specific training for attendees so that we can make sure that when we're talking as partners, we're all doing it in the most productive way possible. I think that's going to start making a big difference as well. So that's where we are with our work on safer public spaces.
Any questions either on encampment action or antisocial behaviour? Thank you so much on that one. Move on to the next part, the prevent.
Yeah, last bit from me, because I think it'd be useful for you to have sight of this, is so prevent is one of the 4 strands of counter-terrorism under the National Contest Counter-Terrorism Programme. Pursue, prevent, prepare, protect. I always forget the 4, but I got that right this time. The local authority has the statutory duty to hold the prevent strand for contest. So what that means in practice is we have to have a prevent panel. We have to chair what's called the channel panel, which is where individuals are at risk of radicalisation, whether that's religiously motivated, whether that's politically motivated. Incel is now deemed a radicalization pathway as well. We have to have a panel to hear those cases and try and divert people off in a multi-agency way, a bit like a risk assessment conference, but for counter-terrorism. Our numbers, because of the small local population of residents, remain low. We don't have many prevent cases. I've had one since I've been here, and I'm used to having sort of 10 a month. So what that means is it's very easy to lose your edge if you're not using a tool very often. So what we've decided to do, and with the support of and the guidance from the Home Office, who own Contest, is we've co-located our channel panel de-radicalisation pathways with Westminster Council. It seemed like a good fit, and that was the local authority that was recommended by the Home Office due to the nature of the kind of incidents that we might be privy to. So that's gone live. The next channel panel meeting is on Monday. So even if we don't have a case, we're in a space where we're watching it taking place. We're being part of the dialogue, supporting those decisions. And then on the rare occasions where we do have one, we've got the support and the expertise of Westminster to lean into in that meeting as well. For me personally, it's a good fit. I'm glad that we've done it because it was an area where it was statutory. We have to have something. And the concept of just getting people together to sit there and go, it's enough. Excuse me, another nil return, come back in 3 months, seemed a waste of everybody's time. But at least this way we're keeping those tools nice and honed. But there's as a result, there's a new prevent delivery plan, which is going to be rolled out in January, which will inform our approach to this strand of counter-terrorism for the next 5 years. It'll be readily available once that's finalised.
Any questions? Thanks,
Okay.
Steve.
Well, thank you, Jeff. For the sorry, was I supposed to be on mic? You want me to speak? So I didn't know whether I was supposed to be, but we might have been John. Well, again, from my third time saying, yeah, I would like to have seen the minutes, the issues that we raised last time in the minutes, somehow being referred to it in this meeting. And I think some of the things that we talked about last time are the things that are mainly concerning the residents of the square mile. So I think it's quite important that we do have some issues for that. I won't repeat those, but I do want to talk about modern slavery, because I believe this is probably the biggest in terms of quantity crime in the square mile, and yet we don't have this in our crime and disorder partnership at all. We know that there are a number of Sudanese men arriving at Liverpool Street Station most weeks. Some of them claim to be under 18, as are dealt with through children's services. Others aren't. I mean, it's pretty obvious to me that they're being trafficked into the city because they come from Sudan. They come in large groups. I think as I've said before in other meetings, I think it's quite clear that a lot of the delivery drivers that operate in the city are probably victims of modern slavery. They're probably working with under other people's names. They're probably there's a lot of pressure on them to be working and giving the money that they're earning back to the traffickers under threat of what will happen to their families back home if they don't do that. I'm sure everyone would have seen the news reports on the BBC the last couple of days about mini markets, of which there are certainly some in the city. So I suppose all this surprises me that we don't seem to have any issues around this. Now, I know the police cycling team are well aware of this, and I think when I went out with the police cycling team, I think they said that say don't quote me on it, but as this is actually being recorded, I'm going to get quoted. But something like 20% of the people they stop who are delivery drivers are working illegally. and given how many drivers, the cyclists you see around the square mile, you'll know that this is quite a huge number. So I really think that this is something that does impact on the partnership. It's not just a police issue. And I wonder why we haven't got a clear modern slavery strategy. In fact, the modern slavery strategy of the corporation, I think, was very, very weak. And in Policy and Resources, a few meetings ago, I sort of pushed for that to be strengthened a bit. But I still feel we're ignoring this issue, which of course is now becoming a huge national issue. And I just wonder if we as a partnership should be doing a little bit more to address these issues. Thanks, Joe.
Thank you, Steve. And I think there was two questions there really, because I think I agree with Steve that you know, going back to page 4 and looking at the points that we made, things like about the strategy generally before we got onto modern slavery. You know, members were talking about cross-boundary issues, like cross-boundary issues between the Met, with Islington, and also about the lack of clear articulation of partnership roles and outcomes. So I think, you know, points were made, and it's really understanding when this committee makes points, recommendations, what should our expectations be of them being followed up? Because obviously we're not a committee to be able to direct, but where we've made recommendations, what would a reasonable expectation be is my sort of first question.
So I think my reflection on that is the strategy is the strategy of the Safe City Partnership. So it's not a City of London Corporation strategy. It's a strategy of the 5 responsible authorities, of which the corporation is one, albeit a very important member. I hope some of the issues that were fed back at the last meeting, I think clarity around the part, strengthening that sense that it is a partnership and that we are working in partnership, has made it through into the strategy. And the Safer City Partnership self-feedback, they had minutes from this meeting, but ultimately it's that partnership that agrees its strategy. I think in issues, you know, if for this committee, if there is a sense that there's a lack of evidence or lack of impact of partnership, that then in fact, rather than reflecting it in the document, the strategy, it's in our delivery of that strategy and calling that in. As for the modern day slavery issue, I mean, I agree that's an issue that goes beyond policing, and perhaps that might be a very specific thing you want us to bring a response. I couldn't articulate a joined up partnership response to that. That just might be my ignorance in terms of my role. But certainly we could go away and find out that information so you can test it out.
Maybe perhaps sort of articulate a question that we might put around that. Would that be helpful?
I think the question is, how is the Safer City Partnership addressing the issue of modern day slavery in the City of London? And I think that's a good essay question for us to take away and bring back to this meeting. You know, as you say, that is like the work with rough sleeping encampments, where it is the impact and the role of partners, and our line of sight and our response, and the role of our social services alongside police in relation to that issues and our employment practices, etc., that form that response. So it's appropriate.
Thank you, and thank you, Steve, for raising it. Thank you. Any other questions on the strategy? I did have one, which was really sort of the question about the barriers to success for each of the priorities, because although we know fine what the priorities are and the approach that that the partnership's taking, I don't think we really know the key barriers to success. So perhaps that's something that the partnership could reflect on.
Yes, it's a really good point. Yes, with regards to the barriers, I could give a sort of a verbal sort of answer to that, but equally I'd be really happy to sort of get something down on paper and sort of help you understand what are our deliverables, what are our barriers to that delivery, and share that with you. I'd be delighted to.
And perhaps where we come back with specific issues that we're deep diving into, that is one of the questions we answer in looking at that. You know, are there barriers to us going further?
Thank you. Anything else on the strategy, or can we move to questions? General questions.
It's just going back to what I mentioned earlier. I mean, obviously there's reference in the report to safe havens. Is there going to be any additional specific provision for the festive period that we know of?
So as there's an ask from us into organisations, specifically hotels in particular, that started last week with a request, because at present, not many well, they've not been asked, so this isn't on them, but not many hotels are safe havens. I think there's only 3 in a square mile out of all of the hotels. So me and Sanjay have put out an ask to every hotel, asking them to consider becoming safe havens as well. I'm hoping for a good take up.
Yeah, just to come back on that, I mean, I know what we've had sort of previously, not every year in the city, but occasionally, and when it's not happened, it's because one or other of the key partners has not been available. I mean, one year it was the ambulance service, for instance, was not available. But what we had was a designated facility, and it was outside Liverpool Street Station, where you had people from the police and the ambulance service and social services all in one place, and it was sort of pop up in the evenings, particularly. I guess now it would probably be Wednesday and Thursday evenings rather than Thursday and Friday evenings, just during December up to Christmas Day, and the feedback from that was always very positive.
So that goes back to a point I was made earlier on about the police's resourcing of that great big branded bus. That is a partnership space, and that's 3 or 4 nights a week forever now. That's been purchased, and that's, you know, I think that the learning was taken from the really positive response, and they needed something a little bit more substantial than just a pop-up tent. So having that bus with access to health provisions, yeah, that does that for now, I think.
If I could ask a question that the deputy chair wanted asking, so I probably won't be as eloquent as Helen, but it was about the use of artificial intelligence, and I think her question was really about the use of artificial intelligence in policing, but with this being a partnership committee, it's whether perhaps we should widen that out, and you could perhaps help me to see whether it's purely an issue for policing or whether artificial intelligence should be a wider issue for the partnership. I mean, I don't know, Richard, if you wanted to kick off, and then Phil.
Before I start, and very kindly, Chair, we had a senior leadership away day within the corporation yesterday with a whole morning session on AI, including a presentation from representatives of the financial sector talking about how AI is in some ways transforming, in inverted commas, parts of their world. And we considered the implications for use of AI in the corporation, including the human impact of that and its impact on jobs. That's by way of an entree to the Police Authority Board Chair is about to commission a paper about the use of AI now and in the future within the city police, encompassing everything from the ethical dimension to that, the operational impact of it. So that's just in the policing, but every bit of the public sector will be exploring one way or the other use of artificial intelligence. So again, maybe it is a entirely reasonable question to push back onto the Safer City Partnership. Say, could we have a bit of a sit rep when you look across the partnership about are some people is one of the responsible authorities ahead of the others? And what does the collective picture look like? I think Phil, unless you think differently, I think we can take that away.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly the right approach. It's a really timely question and a really big one. So what we'll do is we'll get that into the Safe City Partnership space and get a sort of a 360 view of that, and we'll bring that back.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? No? Well, I don't have anything else that I consider urgent, so thank you, everybody, and the meeting is closed. Thank you.